You've often taken the path less traveled in life. I'm sure that's led to a lot of unforeseen circumstances. I want to know which was a bigger shock to you, running outside in your socks during the earthquake in Tokyo, or that becoming a master at Google Plus didn't end up being a cash cow for freelancers.
So what was more complicated? Is that what you said?
Which was a bigger shock to you?
Definitely the earthquake, because up until that point, I'd been living in a tiny little shoebox apartment, and we'd only been getting like occasional minor rumbles for the prior 8 months or so that I was there. But like within the last couple of weeks that I was there, I got hit by a big old earthquake, which really surprised me. Um, Pretty close as a runner-up to the Google thing because that was a big deal too. So they're pretty close, and it's funny that they both kind of happened within the same kind of year. So yeah, it was an interesting time, but definitely the earthquake. That was a big one.
Yeah, it was back in 2012, and
It
you
was.
you have you've been online for so long. I didn't realize this until I started doing a little bit
No
of
gray hairs, yeah.
well, not even that, but just you're the way that you've been so bullish on personal brand. And but let's rewind even a little bit before that. You were submitting illustrations to iStock. You were an artist, and you had more than 350 different images get approved on there, but even more were rejected along that process, right? And it kind of forced you to hone your skills and evolve your style. And so I'm curious if you could touch on adjusting to feedback as a creator, the importance of consistency, especially when you're just getting started.
It's a great question. Yeah. I was lucky in that sense that I was introduced to the need to really be on my game in terms of figuring out very quickly what I needed to do to adjust my work to apply to the marketplace with the added benefit of having people on the other side of the screen. In this case, it was iStock. I had various inspectors, real life human beings who would actually sit there and look through the pieces of work that are coming through. I'm not sure they still do it that way. It might be AI now, but yeah, the process for uh, adding new art to that platform involved real people looking at it. And in many cases, about maybe two out of every three that I'd share would be rejected. And I'd have to either update it or bin it entirely. So it was a very, looking back, a perfect kind of environment to very quickly um, improve, iterate based on feedback. And that's the ideal situation for anyone who's creating anything. And really want to think about it in that term, in those terms. Even if you're writing, whatever it is that you're doing, you want to be thinking in terms of get feedback, get insights from the marketplace quickly. If you're lucky enough to have real life inspectors doing that for you who can reject and kind of like give you a critique, that's ideal. But obviously you can also have that in the form of people looking at your stuff and giving you comments and that kind of thing. So you want to get yourself, whatever you're doing in terms of creating content, you want to get yourself in an environment that gets you that quick feedback. So you're creating a lot, you're sharing a lot, you're publishing a lot, which is quite easy to do these days, given the setup, given what we've got in terms of the tools and the things we can use, platforms. Just get lots of stuff out and iterate with every little piece of feedback that you get from the marketplace. And so I was introduced to that process very early. I'd actually been introduced to it probably earlier than really spending much time on social media initially. It was just me kind of being on iStock and working through that system, that process, and learning very quickly. So I benefited a huge amount by kind of forcing myself into a situation where I had a lot of feedback. I was creating a ton and I wanted it to work. I could see money was attached to the feedback as well. Like the more I kind of was able to publish quality material that people liked, I would get more money reflected in that. So that was a great process. And I kind of wish anyone who's kind of creating anything, whether it be audio or videos or illustrations, photography, goes through that process. And in terms of consistency, yeah, I mean, that introduced me to the importance of being consistent too. Certainly, in the sense of the more consistent I was with sticking to the creative process and not getting sidetracked, not getting disappointed by the rejections, I stayed in line for the most part. There were some moments where I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. Then, the next day I was back up, ready to do it again. But it really showed me the importance of consistency that's sitting behind improving your skills and the importance of consistency behind making an impact, accumulating enough wins and failures together to push you forward, and no matter what it is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can learn from that process, and that's something that we go through definitely with X, and like that instant feedback and just being able to kind of push and push and get and adjust and iterate. And I find that very valuable in my journey. And when you're thinking about just creating, that's one thing. But then there's the business side of things as well. And a lot of people get caught up in that. I was talking about this with Nicholas Cole on a past episode about, he's got these books, The Art and Business of Writing, right? And he thinks about it very distinctly that way. And you were such a great artist, a talented digital artist, but you also were spinning up blogs and you were monetizing and you were doing things from the business side with Red Lemon Club and Ape on the Moon. Was it hard to learn the business side of the art? And how did you balance those two things?
Yeah, it took me a very long time looking back to really get a handle on it. And I still don't feel like I know the full picture. I still feel like I'm a beginner in many ways because things continue to keep evolving. The internet landscape is always changing. So there's always a certain degree of adapting that you got to do to really make it work. But in terms of monetizing stuff, I think most of my introduction to monetizing was through the freelance world, through realizing that I had jumped into deciding to be a freelancer. I didn't give myself any other opportunity to make money elsewhere. I just jumped straight into it with very little by way of a emergency fund. So I kind of put my back against the wall, burned my ships, and forced myself to figure it out because I wasn't going to go back to an office. I had to make it work. So there was that added pressure of needing to make it work, which forced me to get good as quickly as I could in terms of knowing what to do to attract clients and create things, create opportunities on that side of things. I wasn't particularly fantastic early on at monetizing things like blogs. That took me a while. It was mostly a case of me just writing a ton of stuff and adding blog posts for years before I started monetizing. Although having said that, the Red Lemon Club was monetized pretty early on. Ape on the Moon, it was kind of just like more of an experiment. But with Red Lemon Club, it was, yeah, you're right. Actually, I did have an ebook that I did sell through that, and it was actually Red Lemon Club that was kind of birthed because I wanted to market the ebook. So I think it's what it really taught me was just be enterprising if you can, get yourself out there, create something, and you, even if you don't really know what you're doing, it's more a case of just create it, follow your nose, your curiosity, what's interesting to you, and just have that faith that you can figure it out. I know it sounds a little bit cringy, a little bit, often repeated, but that's been the thing that's helped me the most is just having that faith of you'll figure it out, especially when there's that added pressure of needing to make it work, which is probably why Ape on the Moon, for example, took a while because I didn't have so much pressure around needing to make it work.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, the advice that seems trite, there's a reason that everyone says it so much. Because then when you actually go through it, you're like, oh, wait, that actually is the answer. And then you start preaching it and you're
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
damn, I sound like I'm just saying the same thing. But it's like, there's a reason. You mentioned the ebook.
Yeah.
The ebook that you put out, is that the one, the infamous long title one that you always kind of giggle at?
Yeah.
10 steps to
The one even I
powerful
forget the name.
Yeah, 10 steps to powerful online self-promotion for creatives. A
That's it.
223-page ebook. Uh, the
Wow, I didn't
subtitle
know that.
was actually even longer. An in-depth guide to effective marketing, winning regular clients, and making sales using the internet. So for me, I
Yeah.
took a look at this, and you're ahead of the curve with a lot of the stuff. You really touched on like a lot of things in there, which we'll get into. But I'm curious, you wrote this um, in a time when this maybe wasn't so obvious to people that you could do all these things and create a personal brand and monetize. How has online marketing evolved since you started really looking at it and digging into it and being a part of it? And how's it stayed the same?
I think for the most part that the main threads that run through marketing that have been around and that have worked for thousands of years are still with us, right? The very basic building blocks of what makes good marketing is still there. I think that along the way we've been distracted by kind of gimmicky things that look interesting that seem to present the opportunity to take shortcuts. And I have to say, looking back at that ebook, there's the many chapters in there which were basically about that. It was like there's all these things that kind of sound cool that will multiply traffic and promise thousands of extra followers, but really it's just a kind of gimmicky way to generate followers, and you're moving away from the kind of tried and tested, the true stuff, which is basically just being a real human being and creating relationships with people and telling stories. And some of the stuff that was in there was working for me, but it was more short term stuff, if I remember correctly. It was a mixed bag, but in terms of what's changed, I mean, yes, the technologies are amazing these days. I mean, there's so much you can do. There's so many ways you can be creative, and I suppose the only downside of that is just the sheer range of choice that can be distracting and overwhelming with just how many different things you can do. Which is why I admire what you do, Greg, so much, because you're very good at just dialing in a very specific way of helping people, which you've done very well with the audio focus, which is in complete opposition to what I was writing about in that book, which is like just do everything and try all these different things. It was more of a introduction to all the things you could do back in, when was it, 2010 or something. So yeah, things have changed a lot, but I think what I've learned, like the big lesson for me, is just despite all of this change, you need to have your head screwed on and you need to understand the fundamentals of marketing. And every time I've seen some new platform appear, some new app, some shiny new thing, I try and take a breath now rather than just like run along and try and jump into it immediately without thinking too much, because it looks like it's promising all these quick fix solutions to what we're looking for, quick sales, but you can't sidestep, you can't avoid the grassroots relationship building stuff, which is just a case of being real, using the communication channels on offer, whether it be audio, video, writing. Those aren't really going to change. Speak to people like a real human being, and find a way to genuinely care for their transformation, their improvement, and tell a few stories, and keep the communication going. That's the other thing. It's more a case of not getting sidetracked by all the magical things on offer. It's more a case of let's stick to the basics, which is showing up every day rather than try and do something clever that gets you more sooner. There's no shortcuts. That's what I found.
I love that you're so focused on the human element of it. And I actually want to read you the part of the ebook that you wrote about what to do on Twitter. Okay. You said, be active on Twitter, tweeting regularly, at least 2 or 3 times a day, although it's up to you. And don't forget to interact and be human, as opposed to using Twitter simply as a means to send out promotional links. Provide content that is consistent within a niche that you have chosen that relates to your brand, your service, and your blog. Try not to deviate away from content centered on one industry or focused area because you want people to come to know you for tweeting certain things. Strongly consider becoming an expert at something in particular. So, very consistent with what you just said a decade and a half later. Very
And by the way,
relevant.
I haven't read that in over a decade.
I'm sure you haven't. And so, but I'm curious if, so that's the strategy back then. You just kind of outlined your general strategy now as a creator, but with X specifically, what is your strategy right now in 2023 and what are you trying to get out of it?
I think more than anything, I'm here to learn from it. Like I think that's been the thing that I've figured is the most valuable in terms of making use of social media. More than anything, it's about, I know that I've said that there's like fundamentals you need to follow, absolutely, but there's so many little bits and pieces to it that I'm still a student. So what I've realized, for example, the reason I say that is because in the last 4 months, I shifted my personal brand pretty significantly. So I was previously my primary market, you could say, was mindset, psychology, health, basically. And I realized fairly recently that I wanted to put my spearhead um, work in the bracket of wealth, which was more about personal branding. And because I made that shift, people have had to now adapt. So I haven't really been growing that much. I've been flatlining, and I've been growing on other platforms because I haven't made that shift as pronounced. For example, on Medium, I've been growing really rapidly, but I've kept my focus more on the mindset, whereas I've shifted it more significantly on Twitter, X, in terms of personal branding. So I'm seeing my stats leveling out, which is kind of frustrating, but I know what's happening. People are adapting now to this fairly significant change because it's a primary market that I'm changing in. So I'm now kind of going through a rather excruciating phase in a way. If I'm hanging on needing to grow, that is, of seeing some people dropping out and new people coming in. So it's a kind of period of replacement. So my goal with X right now, I guess the reason I answered in that way is because I'm still learning. Like I'm seeing how these platforms react and shift and respond to how you engage with them. But yes, I'm bullish on X. I think it's an exciting platform. It's becoming, as long as Elon, keeps his head straight and doesn't do anything completely crazy, drastic. Although he's liable to do that, knowing him. But his plans and his prospects for the future with it, in terms of what he plans to do with it, is very exciting. And just sort of being the everything app is interesting. So I want to definitely be attached to that and make the most of it and adapt in whatever way I need to make use of it in the best way. So I would still say I'm still figuring out. Like the big growth that I had over last year was based on very simple fundamentals. Again, it was just a case of me sharing lots of different types of posts and then seeing what worked and then doing more of it. So my threads last year did really, really well. So I decided to I didn't really know how Twitter worked, but I just said, look, there's obviously something about this thread format that's working. So I'm just going to triple down on this, as Gary Vee says. And that worked out very well. I just did daily threads for about 8 months, and that blew up my account. So I think following on from that phase of learning, I'm just going to keep doing that kind of thing. I'm going to keep an eye out for what's working really well, and then triple down on that.
Yo, guys, real quick, if you're enjoying the Louder podcast, you're going to love Louder Spaces. Every week, twice a week, I host Spaces on X unlike any other Spaces you've heard before. We've created a real audio experience and bring in big, influential accounts to discuss topics around personal brand, content, and monetization. We use custom AI audio, react to clips from other podcasts and videos, and we have what's called Amplify, where we bring audience members on stage and everyone in the room likes, comments, and retweets their content and gets them tons of exposure. You could be the next person we blow up. Just come by Louder Spaces every Wednesday and Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Follow me on X at GregLunt27. See you there. Yeah, I think we're going to come back to one of your threads in a minute, but I really relate to this idea of pivoting and having to kind of crawl through the mud a little bit with regards to people leaving, people coming back, engagement, suffering, whatever it may be, as you search for your sustainable voice, right? Because we can't be creating around things that just because we did it in the past and that's why people followed us, because we're never going to be able to keep it up and provide actual value if we're doing it just for numbers or for past experiences and past audience. And I just went through something similar. I'm only just emerging from that about 5 months later now. Well, I suppose if I did the math, it took about 4 months for me to get to from hard pivot into like niching down within a new area and kind of going through that more generic content stage where like I was in like self-development, personal growth. Perhaps you're in like personal brand, audience building, and then maybe you find exactly where you go down because you have so much experience in your career that eventually you'll be like, that's the spot. And it's
Yeah,
a
well, I'd
long
like to think that where I'm at right now is it, but I know from personal experience that I'm going to be continually changing. I think that's just an inevitable part of the whole process as well. Having looked back, I have the fortune of having spent quite a few years doing this and seeing lots of pivots. And there needs to be this understanding of your overall overarching purpose, this overarching sense of what drives you, what you value the most. And then within that arc, there's lots of different potential transformations you can bring people through. So for the last 10 years, I've been going really deep into psychology coaching and helping people with mindset. And that was really interesting for a while. But it relates extremely closely to the personal brand stuff that I'm doing right now, which is about helping people communicate more effectively and perform better, but in a more specific area. So it still relates to my main thing and where my main kind of natural talents and interests lie. But there's this kind of inevitable pivoting that's going to keep going on.
I admire you for doing that and for acknowledging where you can dive deeper and where you've had all this success and being able to package that. This journey, like we're talking about, it's like it's a lot of twists and turns. And I know you started a new Twitter account. You have like your other one. I think it's I am Alex Mathers. And but with this new one, I went back to look at how it started and what was your first tweets over there on this 84 account. And your first tweet, I don't know if you remember this, but it has only one comment on it, and it was from Dakota Robertson, and it just said "Let's go" with seven O's as you kind of announced your new account. And you know, when you were doing Ape on the Moon, your blog with Philip, you have these people that are there like supporting you, and you have people that you're partnering with, friends with, whatever it may be. It makes it easier to create, right? When you have people around you that, you know, you build this personal environment and experience, you have friends alongside you. Do you think that's important for people to kind of find their tribe as they're building?
Yeah, I do. And I don't think I've made as much use of the people around me as I could have done. But certainly, whenever I have, lots of good things have happened, especially at the kind of partnership level. You know, there's someone else that you can bounce ideas off. There's so many new opportunities that you kind of get access to when you start speaking to other people. And it's also comforting. It's also nice to have someone who's in a similar boat, who's working on similar things, and you can kind of check in regularly. So that's definitely something that I would recommend anyone who's considering doing that. I don't do it enough. Like I keep kind of going back to my old habits of saying I can do all of this myself, and I very often have to fight that sometimes, including right the process that I'm going through right now is there's a lot of that going on. It's just like me focusing on just trying to get like 6 courses done within a single month to make sure that my launch is as effective as it can be. So sometimes I can be a little bit stubborn on that, even though I know working with other people is just a great way to, yeah, I mean, there's so many pros, and it opens you up to the people they know as well. And there's a ton of kind of resources and leverage that creates. But then there's the other thing of, you know, building your own tribe as well, and viewing your followers and your community around you as a tribe of like-minded people who share similar purposes. And that's the kind of thing that you want to be driven to do. You don't want to be just building an empty, lifeless audience. You want to be building a community of people who relate to one another and feel like they're part of something a bit bigger than themselves. I think that's the key thing in all this, is just knowing that it's not just about you. It's not just about you taking stuff and doing stuff for yourself, which actually can be very exhausting after a while, because if it's just for you, you're going to feel the overwhelm of that kind of rather selfish, you could say, approach. And you'll also get so much benefit from opening up to knowing that you can contribute in a way that's bigger than just you, right? That's when things turned around for me, actually, is when I realized that there was a whole wide world out there, and it wasn't just about me trying to fend for myself. That's a phase I think you go through, right? You know, you have to make money at some point, certainly when you're starting out, but then you hit a point where it's like, is this all there is? I don't really want this. This can't be all that it's about. And that's when you realize that there's a lot of energy that comes, there's a lot of sustenance that comes through opening up to contributing beyond, bringing other people in, and also really thinking about supporting the little community that, or the big community that's growing around you. It's a fulfilling feeling knowing that you've kind of created this community.
Yeah, there's kind of, you point out these two different support systems almost, is like your the people that are next to you that are building at your level and that you can maybe collaborate with or share ideas with, and kind of figure out ways to grow together. Uh, and then your contemporaries, I guess, and then you have the tribe that you're building, not
Mm,
necessarily below you, but people that are following you and that are fans of you,
yeah,
and that there's a different kind of support system, that it's like a one to many versus a one to one.
right.
I think that's really interesting and a good way to think about it.
The other thing I'd add to that is that I think it's probably um, it's been helpful for me to think of it in terms of just one community, right? So you've got people who are on your level at kind of like a partnership level, but you also, like, I've had people who have started off as followers who ended up as you know, partners. I think Philip for Ape on the Moon was he was a follower of my illustrations initially, and then he approached me and we decided to create this thing. So I would see it as just this community, because people are moving up and down within it, or up hopefully, and all kinds of people could enter into your closer team. If you've got raving fans, you know these are the guys who are often going to be very good at kind of like working with you in a community that's like a closed community, whether it be Discord or school or something like that. You've got people who are very vocal about your stuff, and they've sort of demonstrated themselves to be big supporters of you, and they tend to be very good at helping out and spreading the brand message and that kind of stuff too. So I'd see it as like a community where everyone's sort of at the same level, and you certainly want to be speaking to the people who are your followers at a similar level to you. It doesn't need to be seen as like a hierarchical thing.
Totally. And you're basically just there to serve everybody, right? It's like, how can I serve these people no matter where they fall in my personal relationship to them? And there's a lot of different ways you can help people. I'm thinking about building some courses out with Virgil right now. And also, I'm getting into coaching a little bit. I know you have a history of coaching. I've actually heard you say that coaching others was one of, if not the biggest driver in your self development. And so, can you draw that parallel for people between serving others and personal growth?
Yeah, I think it has something to do with, if you want to get really good at something, serve others with it, teach others with it. There's nothing quite like getting on a call with someone one to one when they've invested money into their time with you, to make sure that you know what you need to be telling them, what you need to be saying to encourage them to experience the results they're looking for, that they've paid money to experience. So in the same way that when people show up having bought a course of yours, or they're there for a workshop or whatever, and you're teaching it, you want to make sure that you're delivering. You want to have repeat students, right? You want to have raving clients who tell other people about how good their experience was with working with you. So it really switches you on in terms of, this is where I need to focus. These are the things I need to study. I need to ensure that this works. And the more you know, the more you're mastering this thing, because you're essentially forced into mastering this craft, because you're teaching it, you want to make it work. You're going to be getting so good at it yourself. And this is why I talk about how when you're teaching anything, whether it be creating a course for someone or coaching someone, you want to be modeling what you teach. You want to be choosing the stuff that you teach based on the transformation you yourself are going on, because you're going to be effortlessly drawn to that kind of stuff anyway, because you're looking to improve that in yourself too. So when you can bring the two together, you bring teaching and coaching to that area of specialism that you're already developing in yourself. Whether, and if you look at your bookshelf, for example, that's going to paint the picture of that kind of mastery that you're working on for yourself. Like, if you look at your bookshelf, it's going to tell you this is what you need to be spending time on, because you would buy a book in this thing, whether it be, mindset, fitness, whatever it is. You're going to be buying and reading that book whether somebody else tells you to or not. Like, it's an effortless thing. So you want to be spending your time doing stuff that you're drawn to effortlessly anyway, because then you get that kind of unfair advantage as well, because you're getting hot shit at something that you're already obsessed about. So you bring all of that together. That's the sweet spot. If you can find that thing where you're teaching, you're sharing, you're serving other people, which forces you to get really good at something, you're also modeling it because it's part of your own transformation. That's where you've got something really powerful, I think.
I want to zoom in a little bit on talking about finding that thing and generating that energy to put towards something that you really enjoy. You started, obviously, as we mentioned, as an illustrator and an artist, and went into business, and now you're very much a writer now, or I guess you've always kind of been, but there's these different forms of art, right, that you've been able to create, powerful forms of self-expression. Uh, what are some of the different ways that you've learned to tap into your creative flow state, whether it was with the brush or with the pen?
I think it's interesting that you dive in on that, because that's the thing that I suppose connects all of it. Like, no matter what type of art you commit yourself to, there's always the need to connect with that creative flow, right? And enter into that creative flow and get better at that, because ultimately your work, whether it's writing or illustrating or even coaching or teaching or being on spaces, whatever, public speaking, all of it's going to benefit from you being less in your head and more in a kind of creative state where it's just loose and you're not overthinking things. This is still something I'm, improving every day. So in that sense, my time as an illustrator, I suppose, introduced some lessons around how that works, as has writing. I think anyone who's looking to develop the creative flow element in them is going to benefit from things like writing, creating anything, because you're going to be producing utter shite if you can't get into that creative flow. You need to expect to not really be feeling it when you first start, and then just, sit your ass down anyway, or get on your standing desk or whatever, and get moving, right? Do whatever it takes to enter into the motion of whatever it is you're trying to do. So if you're illustrating, scribble a doodle for 5 minutes, right? Or if you're writing, free write for 5 minutes. So it doesn't matter at that point what it is you create. It's just that you're doing it, and you're kind of almost signaling to yourself that you're in this new mode now, which is a not worrying about your mistakes. You're not critical. You're just doing. You're just in doing mode. And then your body kind of enters into, or your mind, whatever it is, it enters into kind of a new state, which is like, all right, well, let's chill then. Let's let Alex do his thing, right? And let this process unfold. And then you're in a nice loose state. That's what you want to try and find with whatever it is you're doing, just to kind of loosen yourself, relax. That's when the best material comes, is when you're relaxed, because your thoughts have now moved over. You haven't got this layer of like, oh my God, you're doing this wrong, or like, I haven't got enough time to do this, blah, 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 or I need to edit this, or I shouldn't be saying this because people might get really annoyed because I'm saying this, blah, blah, blah. Those thoughts, because you're in motion, have now settled like particles in a glass of water. Like if you leave it alone, the particles are going to settle down just like your thoughts do. And then you've got this kind of creative wisdom that comes through, which we're now entering into kind of like the spiritual world a little bit. But I think that's something that people need to explore, is just what happens at your mind when you can still be still. You start getting these interesting insights, all these ideas start coming through, these like the right decisions start to come to mind. And that's where you want to be. You want to find that. So as you and I are having this conversation, we don't really know what we're going to say next, but we're allowing that kind of intuitive intelligence to come through. And that's going to come through more clearly when we're chilled.
Yeah, you said how it was kind of like a little spiritual to get into it, but I actually think it's quite tactical. It's quite practical to sit and exactly just sit and do for a few minutes, and that will literally just alter your state into one of creativity and openness that you can then channel in the things that you're looking for. And it's funny that you say that, because I was looking at your most viral thread, I believe, ever. And it was the 14 dirty little secrets to quadruple your productivity. And right in between your spiritual number one, meditate for a minute, and number three, decide to have fun with it, you had number two, which got the most engagement of any of the 14, which was stop being a little bitch. And it's kind of what you're saying, which is just sit down and do it. You said most of us are unproductive because we're complaining to ourselves in the dim theater of our minds about how hard everything is. Find your inner badass and unleash the demons of hell. What's the biggest key, you think, to unlocking our inner badass as a creator?
I think it's wrapped up in a lot of what I spoke about before, which is, and the whole idea of not being a little bitch sounds kind of cruel, and almost as if you're applying a lot of self pressure. But what I mean is that you're actually turning away from what most of us normally do, which is to worry and complain in our own minds, right? We're like, oh no, I don't want to be here. I want to be on the beach. I don't want to be creating. That's you being a little bitch in the context of you needing to get work done in the next 10 minutes. So by not being a little bitch, you basically need to turn away from those thoughts. It's not about being critical. It's not about thinking positive or anything like that. It's just about realizing that these thoughts aren't helping you. Like complaining isn't helping you. And the best thing you can do for yourself is to kind of chill out and get back to what you're doing. And when you operate in that mode, you're basically not overthinking. You're back in the moment. You're back in action. And I would say that's how to connect with that inner badass, when you're not criticizing yourself, you're not criticizing the world around you, you're just in it. And when you're in it and you're able to let go, all this clever stuff comes to mind, like all these insights, all this real intelligence comes to mind. Not to mention the fact that you're going to be a lot less scared of stuff, because fear always comes from the thoughts you have about what life's doing to you at that point. Like, it's kind of victim thinking. If you let go of the victim, you're going to be an instant warrior right there. So that applies very nicely to creative work too.
That's amazing. And we do need to tap into that. We need to get into, because motivation is fleeting, right? As they say. And so you need to have somewhere from within that's going to inspire you to create. And that's something that I really admire about you, Alex, is the way that over so many years, you've been able to find different ways to tap into your creativity, to share that with people, to inspire people, to build products and services that serve people. And so talented. I didn't realize until I had prepared for this interview all the stuff with your illustrations. I'd only, we've only been friends for a few months now, and I've seen a lot of your writing and your newsletter, which everyone should sign up for, the Mastery Den. And we have, I think, a real connection. I just feel like there's something that there's really special about you that I can continue to learn from. And so thank you for bringing all of that wisdom and energy to this show. It's been an honor to have you on, and I want to give you an opportunity to share anything, something you want to promote. I know you have your course, your newsletter. If you want to dig into those a little deeper, and where people can find you online and connect with you.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing our friendship together, and gaining from each other. Right, like learning a lot from you too with the voice stuff and your diligence around focusing on one thing and really making it happen. The louder thing is really incredible, like the growth of that. So I'm learning a lot from you, brother, as well. So I appreciate that. When you can relax, have faith, tap into that inner wisdom, you'll find that it'll give you the answers. So I've gotten better at tapping into that, and I want to encourage you guys to try and do the same. Is find a way to move past that fear, which can arise when we are wrapped up in our own heads, and be okay with the fact that you won't know, but it's still worth taking action.
Brilliant as always. Thank you, brother. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, bro.